On the night shift, you quickly get used to being alone, but the scariest part is when you realize you aren't the only one in the building. The third floor. I started working as a night receptionist at an old hotel downtown last month. The building is showing its age, with faded carpets, dark wood paneling, and drafty corridors that always smell faintly of old floor wax. My first night shift was last Thursday. Around midnight, the senior clerk, Marcus, told me he was going down to the basement break room to get some sleep. He said the lobby gets completely quiet after 1 in the morning, and he promised to be back by 3. That left me alone at the reception desk. The lobby is not very big. To my right, about 20 feet away, are the 2 main elevators. The elevator on the right works fine, but the one on the left has been out of order for about 6 months. It was shut down, so everyone had to share the single working elevator. The call button for the broken elevator did not light up if you pressed it, and the indicator light above the frame was always dark. By 1 in the morning, the building was silent. The only sound was the steady ticking of the grandfather clock near the front entrance. I was sitting at the computer, entering guest registrations, when a loud metallic scrape came from the wall to my right. It was a heavy, grinding noise, like metal cables sliding over a rusty pulley. I looked up at the elevator doors. The digital indicator above the broken left elevator was glowing. A red light shaped like an arrow was pointing up. The number display slowly changed from 1 to 2. I sat there, staring at the lit number. The low hum of the elevator motor vibrated through the floorboards. The display ticked again and stopped on 3. I heard the heavy thud of the elevator cabin stopping on the 3rd floor. In the quiet lobby, the sound of the metal doors opening up there traveled right down the hollow concrete shaft. The scrape of the doors was clear, followed by complete silence. I stared at the red indicator light, trying to figure out what was happening. The 3rd floor is mostly used for long-term guests, but it was empty that night. Nobody was checked into those rooms. I waited for someone to make a sound, but nothing happened. The 3rd floor remained silent. After about 15 seconds, I heard the faint clang of the doors closing up there. The machinery behind the wall started whirring again. The red arrow flipped to point down, and the display counted down to 2 and then back to 1. My chest felt tight as I watched the numbers. The elevator stopped at the lobby level, inside the alcove across the lobby. The mechanical hum died down, leaving the lobby quiet again. I stood up from my chair, keeping my eyes on the metal doors. The doors of the broken elevator slid open. The interior of the cabin was lit by a small yellow bulb, but the space was empty. The wooden walls of the carriage were dusty, and the brass handrail was bare. I could even smell old grease and cold air coming from the open shaft. The doors stayed open for about 6 seconds, then they slid shut. The red indicator light blinked out, and the lobby went quiet again. My hands were cold. I reached for the desk phone to call the basement, but my hand hovered over the receiver. I was the new guy. If I woke up Marcus on my very first night because an empty elevator moved, he would think I was incompetent. I told myself it was probably just an electrical glitch in the old wiring. I sat back down and tried to focus on the computer screen, but I was listening to every tiny creak in the walls. Exactly 15 minutes passed. The grandfather clock chimed once for 1:30 a.m. Right after the chime, the broken elevator groaned again. The red arrow above the door turned on. The brass doors immediately slid open on the lobby floor. I stared at the open cabin. The dim yellow light cast a long shadow across the carpet. The air in the lobby suddenly felt cold, and I felt a strange pressure in my ears, like the atmospheric density in the room had just shifted. It felt like the sensation you get when someone walks past you very close in the dark. pushing a draft of air against your skin. After a few seconds, the doors slid shut. The machinery whirred, and the elevator began to climb back to the third floor. I watched the indicator light. 2, 3. It stopped on the third floor. Once again, the hollow sound of the doors opening up there reached my ears, followed by a pause, and then the sound of them closing. In my mind, I could picture it clearly. Someone was stepping out of the lift, their invisible feet pressing into the carpet of the third-floor hallway. The elevator immediately started moving down again. It stopped on the first floor, but the doors did not open this time. I stood there, holding my breath, waiting for the brass panels to slide apart. But the elevator just sat there, silent. The red arrow simply blinked out. The mechanical hum died, and the elevator went dark. The doors stayed closed because whoever had taken the lift up had already gotten off on the third floor. The elevator had simply returned to the lobby, empty, its job completed. Marcus came back upstairs at 3, holding a cup of cold coffee. I told him what had happened, but he just laughed and told me I was letting the quiet lobby get to me. He explained that the left elevator had been completely disconnected from the hotel's main circuit breaker during a renovation. There was no electricity flowing to that shaft at all. I still work at the hotel, but I do not like the quiet hours anymore. I cannot stop thinking about the sequence of those doors opening and closing. It was too deliberate. I keep thinking about the idea of an invisible guest who lives on the third floor. I picture them using that deadlift to go out for a walk in the middle of the night, and then using it to return quietly to their room. The coffee mug. 4 years on the night shift as a janitor teaches you to appreciate the quiet. At 3 in the morning, nobody is around to bother you. It is just a vacuum cleaner and 12 floors of empty office space. By midnight, even the guard downstairs is asleep. The building makes some noise, like clicking pipes or the humming AC, but you get used to it. There was this one office on the 12th floor, room 1208. The accountant who used it quit a month back. The room was empty, but the overhead light stayed on. The supervisor once mentioned the switch had bad wiring, so the main breaker did not shut it off. The job required using a key card to get in and turning it off manually every night. Last Thursday, I went up there at 2:15 a.m. The key card beeped, the lock clicked, and the door swung open. On the empty desk, right next to the keyboard, there was a ceramic coffee mug. I stopped. The room had been locked and vacant for weeks. As I walked closer, I could see steam rising from the coffee. A quick touch to the side of the cup confirmed it. The ceramic was hot enough to sting. It had been poured only moments earlier. I looked out through the glass wall into the dark hallway, but nothing was visible. Anyone there? The words just fell flat against the drywall. I checked the pocket receiver, the little device that tracks active security badges on the floor. It showed only one authorized badge. Mine. Nobody else was checked into the building. I took the mug to the break room. After pouring the coffee down the drain and washing the cup, I shoved it deep into the back of a cabinet. Back in 1208, I switched off the light, locked the door, and went back to vacuuming. I just wanted to finish the shift and go home. About 10 minutes later, while I was working near the elevators, I noticed the glow again. Office 1208 was lit up. I shut off the vacuum. Walking back down the corridor wasn't easy, but checking it out was part of the job. From outside the glass door, what I saw made no sense. The light was on, and the mug was sitting on the desk again. Steam was still rising from the top. To turn the light off again, I had to swipe my key card. The lock clicked, and I pushed the glass door open. The moment I stepped onto the carpet inside the office, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Next to the mug, a wet ring of condensation had pooled on the wood. Smeared in the moisture was a clear print of a bare hand. The fingers pointed straight toward the door. Then, in the absolute quiet of the open room, came the sound. It was a soft scrape, like plastic sliding on the carpet. It came from under the desk, in the dark space where you put your feet. A slow, raspy breath blew out from the shadows down there, just feet away from where I stood. I left the light on. The glass door locked automatically behind me. A quick walk brought me back to the elevator. Once in the lobby, my keys went onto the guard's desk before I stepped out into the cold night air. I never went back. The supervisor's number was blocked the next morning. Now, when making coffee at home and watching the steam rise, the mind goes back to that 12th floor. It is not the mug or the handprint that causes the shivers. It is the realization of exactly where someone had to be hiding to put a hot cup on the desk the moment the room was empty, and how close the situation came to looking under that desk. The reflection. I have spent 3 years working the night shift as a janitor at the town recreation center. My routine is predictable. After the facility closes at 10, I mop the locker rooms and empty the trash bins. By midnight, the front doors are chained from the inside and the building is empty. The pool hall is always the quietest part of the night. The water just sits there under the dim security lights, flat and undisturbed. Last Thursday, I was in the men's changing room, scrubbing the shower tiles. Around 2 in the morning, a loud splash echoed through the concrete walls. It was a heavy, violent sound, exactly like an adult jumping off the high platform and hitting the water dead center. I set my brush down and walked out onto the pool deck to find whoever had snuck into the building. When I reached the edge of the deep end, the room was still. I looked down at the pool. The water was perfectly flat. It looked like a solid sheet of glass. The sight made me uneasy because it defied basic physics. A heavy impact forces waves to slap against the overflow gutters for several minutes before the water settles. This surface was entirely motionless. There was not a single ripple or bubble anywhere. I decided to search the building. I checked the locker rooms and the front lobby, but everything was locked. The heavy chains on the main entrance were untouched. I even checked the security office, but the badge reader showed that nobody had scanned into the building since lockup. I was completely alone. I told myself it must have been a pressure surge in the filtration system, even though I knew the pumps did not make sounds like that. I went back to the pool deck to retrieve my phone, which I had left on the bleachers near the diving stands. As I walked along the edge of the deep end, the sound happened again. A massive explosion of water erupted right next to me. The noise was deafening, sounding like a heavy object dropped from the ceiling rafters. I winced and braced for the impact of a cold spray, but my face and clothes stayed dry. I looked down. The surface of the pool remained a flawless, unmoving mirror. The contrast between what my ears heard and what my eyes saw made my stomach turn. I stood frozen, staring at the glass-like water near my feet. The underwater lights cast a dim blue glow, reflecting the high diving platform perfectly. In that reflection, a tall person was standing on the very edge of the board, looking down at me. I immediately looked up at the actual diving board. It was empty. There was nothing there but the metal handrails under the dim security lights. When I looked back down at the water, the figure in the reflection stepped off the edge of the board. My ears heard the rush of falling air, followed by a third violent crash right in front of me. The water did not move a millimeter. Instead, the reflection of the person shot to the surface of the pool and stopped. The figure was now floating just beneath the glass smooth surface, upside down, staring straight up at me through the water. Its white eyes were wide open, and its hands were pressed flat against the underside of the surface tension, as if it were trapped behind a sheet of solid window glass. I did not wait for anything else. I dropped my phone, turned around, and ran for the main exit. I hit the emergency push bar with my weight and burst out into the parking lot. I left my keys and my truck inside the gate and walked the 4 miles back to my apartment in the dark. I texted my supervisor the next morning to quit, and I blocked his number right after. I work in a dry warehouse now, driving a forklift. I prefer being around concrete and cardboard. Whenever I see a still body of water, even just a full sink or a puddle in the parking lot, my eyes immediately lock onto the surface. I do not look at the top anymore. I stare straight through the water, waiting for it to finally move, expecting those white eyes to be looking back up at me from the other side of the reflection.